I'm Amber, and today I'm going to be talking about what I've read and am currently reading from this past week. This week, I finished Fast Down Carolina by Dorothy Allison, as I said I would in my last roundup, and you can go and check that video out to hear my full thoughts on that one. This week, I also tried to read Are You My Mother by Alison Bechdel. This is supposed to be about her mother. Previously, before writing this, she wrote a book about her father, and in this book she starts out talking about how she went through the process of writing it, and for the most part reading this book I got like 30%, and she basically uses her mother as a tool to work through her own personal issues, and the story isn't really about her mother at all, which I kind of found bothersome, especially because over and over again throughout the book she's saying, this is about my mother, it's about you, and I'm just like, this isn't really about her at all. At least be honest with the reader, this isn't about your mother, it's about you and how the relationship with your mother affected your writing process. I just didn't like how it was also written, because I had a hard time trying to figure out where she was in her story, because she kept going back and forth, and because it was a graphic novel it just made it a little bit more confusing for me, because I am not a hardcore reader of graphic novels, so I just felt myself getting more confused as I was going. Also, did not agree with her psychoanalysis stuff that she was throwing out there. Well, for one, I don't like Freud, and she seems obsessed with him, and two, a lot of the psychoanalyst stuff that she talks about I don't agree with, and at least not completely. So I just found myself put off by her opinions. And I started Flyboys, A True Story of Courage by James Bradley, and I'm halfway through this book, and we're barely touching on any of the 9 airmen that the story is supposed to be about. I find that really frustrating. I'm not even sure if he is touching on any of the people, on any of the men that we're supposed to be learning more about at all. And the thing is, he first goes into the background of the Japanese motivations for the Pearl Harbor bombing. It's not a one-sided thing. He makes both sides look bad, and I get and I agree and I accept the fact that these are a lot of truths that we need to hear, and so I get that. But the synopsis is very misleading. It was really pissing me off because I was going through 100 pages of things that had nothing to do directly to the airmen's story. I wanted to learn more about these 9 airmen. Who were they? How did they become airmen? What happened to them? And instead I get 100 pages of history of the country of Japan and our relations with them and what they did to China. And so I just find it all really frustrating. I am halfway through, as I said, and although we're finally getting to the Flyboys in general, we're still not touching on those 9 airmen. So overall, I am in a very frustrating position of, do I quit reading this because he doesn't seem to have any real focus about what the story is supposed to be about? Or do I keep continuing on? Because I don't know. Because although I am interested and I do feel like the subject matter is important, I could probably find a better written book that talks about the same subject that he is putting out here in this. Because I didn't go into this book expecting a history course. I was going into this book expecting a biography of these 9 airmen and their story, which the synopsis says we're supposed to be getting, and we're not. I also find that he does a lot of research at you, he piles quotations on top of quotations, and he just is really heavy-handed and overwhelms you. So I've been reading a chapter a day, and I don't know, I am on the fence if I want to quit this or not. And although I am interested and I do feel like the subject matter is important, I could probably find a better written book that talks about the same subject that he is putting out here in this, because I didn't go into this book expecting a history course. I was going into this book expecting a biography of these 9 airmen and their story, which the synopsis says we're supposed to be getting and we're not. I also find that he does a lot of research at you. He piles quotations on top of quotations, and he just is really heavy-handed and overwhelms you. So I've been reading a chapter a day, and I don't know, I am on the fence if I want to quit this or not. And the book that I have started to read alongside that is A Great Table Beauty by Libba Bray. This is about Jonah Doyle, who moves from India after her mother dies to London to attend a private girls' school called Spence Academy, where she deals with visions that started when her mother died. A threat from a man that followed her from India is telling her not to open her mind to these visions, and instead of listening to the threat, she decides that she's going to go ahead and find answers to these visions. Now, as you may know, because I've talked about this previously in the past, I have very big issues with YA. I can't seem to find that many books in YA that I find all that interesting are really well written, and this is another example of that. Now let's talk about the 2 good things about this book. One, it actually keeps me interested all the way through. Like, I am reading this and I'm going to finish it because it's interesting and it's fast-paced enough to keep me going. And the second is that there isn't really a romance in this book, which is like a huge plus for me because I really don't like YA romances. They're either insta-lovey or they just don't seem realistic to me at all. And so it was really nice that there isn't a romance, at least so far, not a romance. Now onto the negatives. The story is supposed to be creepy and dark and scary, to say the least, and instead I feel like I am reading a story for a middle grader because the creepy and scary level is so low that I would have no trouble reading this at night. No problem at all. I expected something a little bit more darker, and it's not that dark. I just find this very typical teenagey crap that, you know, I should have expected, and I kind of did, so that's probably why it's not as hard for me to enjoy it, because I knew going in that I wasn't going to get a masterpiece or anything really that good. But I was expecting a little bit more from the writing. I guess I always constantly hope that a YA author is going to realize that teenagers can handle a complex story and a complex writing style. They can handle it. And teenagers aren't middle graders anymore. It's you need to raise the level of your writing to fit the fact that the teenagers can handle it. And the fact is, it feels like these authors don't really know teenagers, because if they did, they would know that for the most part, and from my own experience when I was a teenager, they read adult books in the mix of it. Like, I was already reading adult books when I was 14 years old, 13 years old, even in the mix. And as each year went by, I was reading more adult than YA. And a lot of it was because that adult writing and stories were more complex, had better writing styles, and they seemed to just kind of open up the world to me more than YA, because YA seemed to be very closed and the writing style was just too simplistic, and they never seemed to just go far enough in anything. I just get tired of YA so easily because of that, especially now as I'm reading it as an adult, and I realize that although I know there are really good YA books out there, I've read a few of them, but I just find that YA authors seem to struggle with the idea that they can be complex in their world building and their story creations and their writing style. So I'm just really frustrated on the whole with that. Even with the positives, I don't think I'm going to give this any higher than maybe a 2.5 to 3 stars. Also, I already know that I will not be continuing on with this series. I'm just going to see where the first book ends, and that will be it for me. So now with The Great and Terrible Beauty, I will probably be picking it up either Aragon by Christopher Paolini, which I will be picking up from the library this week, or I'll be picking up Auschwitz, A New History by Lawrence Rees, which is a reread. In closing, I would love to hear what you guys are reading this week. Thank you all so much for watching, and keep smiling.